So I wanted to do another live video. It's good to see everybody on here. Cheers. Probably the fourth cup of coffee that I've had today. So we're going all in. And I want to talk about the different types of private home care that are out there. A lot of times family members are a bit confused by this. They're saying, hey, listen, I don't even know what kinds of home care I can get. And most of the time, I would say people haven't heard of live-ins, but we'll talk about all the different ways that there's private home care and what you can use. So what we're specifically talking about today is private home care services. We've done videos in the past, whether they're on these lives or on our YouTube channel, that are covering the different types of home care. So there's three major types of home care. There's private home care, which is paid out of pocket. There's home health, that is reimbursed by or paid for by Medicare, and that is typically after a hospital or rehab stay and getting somebody back home safely to provide some rehabilitation and nursing services. And then finally, the last one is the Medicaid or Mass Health option, which you go through your local ASAP. If you type in ASAPs to Google, you'll see the list that comes up. If you're a Massachusetts resident, it's a great starting point to start talking to people about learning about different services that are available for seniors and to learn about what programs they may be eligible for. Another great place to go is your local council on aging. So those are two great places to start. But we're going to specifically talk about services that are provided under the umbrella of private home care. Now, make no mistake, this is a little bit, this industry is the wild, wild west. There is no regulation of any kind whatsoever in private home care outside of standard labor law regulations. So, every private home care company is going to be a little different. You may call a bunch of home care companies that don't provide the services that I recommend, not recommend, but I talk about, and you may call the first one and they do all of these things. So every private agency's business niche can be a little bit different. Minute Women Home Care, Minute Women Dementia Care Specialists are focused on providing care to folks with memory disease. That's what we do. We focus on providing care in the home or in assisted livings for folks that need help with their memory disease, typically Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. So that's our niche, right? We're under the umbrella of private home care, and that's our niche. So the three most common services that almost every private agency provides are what's called hourly care. Hourly care, if you saw our video yesterday talking about the challenges of minimum hours, is blocks of time throughout the day that are typically scheduled in advance, and they are for the most part cast in stone. I would highly recommend you keep your schedule set in stone as much as possible. It is going to erode the relationship typically with a private home care provider if you decide to change the schedule on a week-to-week basis to match your needs. If that's what you're looking to do, and it's going to be a difficult journey because the caregivers don't always have that same availability. So you're basically restarting a schedule sometimes every single week, which is very labor intensive. So with hourly care, keep the hours as consistent as possible, whether that's 3 days a week, whether that's 5 days a week, whether that's 7 days a week, and it's blocks of time. So you're getting 8 hours of care Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that is hourly care, and you're billed on an hourly basis. Then, of course, so that is the most typical starting point for most families, is getting some hourly care, having somebody come in, meeting the threshold for the minimum hours. And again, I would recommend you watch the video about minimum hours that I did. It's on YouTube and it's on Facebook. It's a long video, but it explains the challenges home care companies have with minimum hours, so that you're informed of why somebody might decline a specific schedule or why they ask for a minimum amount of hours. So Hourly is pretty self-explanatory. You're getting a certain block of hours every single day or a few times a week, and that schedule goes on, and you are charged by the hour. The caregivers clock in and clock out typically through telephony using the client's phone or through an app. So it may fluctuate a little bit if the caregiver's late or if the caregiver has to stay an extra 20 minutes because a task isn't finished and needs to be done. But for most intents and purposes, it stays roughly the same, week in and week out, and then that way it's great for budgeting. You know how much money roughly you're going to be spending on a weekly basis and on a monthly basis, and extrapolating that out to a yearly basis. The next one is 24/7. This is obviously the most expensive amount of care that you can get. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So hourly can really be range from, depending on the private agency, 1 hour block of time all the way up to 23 hours a block of time. That is the bulk, right? If you are getting 16 hours a day of care, that's hourly care in our eyes. It doesn't really matter. It's just how we segment a customer into a certain um, kind of category. So sometimes agencies will say, "How many 24s are you doing?" We're doing 3. How many hourlies are you doing? We're doing 10. Okay, so you've got 15 customers. How many live-ins are you doing? Um, and so 24/7 is getting 24 hours a day of care. Typically 24/7 ends up being 7 days a week because it's like, well, what are you going to do on Saturdays and Sundays unless family members are going to take those shifts? Um, 24/7 is usually 7 days a week, but it doesn't have to be, right? So maybe you have a private caregiver, or maybe you have a family member that's fine doing, Friday morning to Monday morning, or Friday evening to Monday morning, and then you have 24/7 care from Monday morning to Friday afternoon. And so that would, in my eyes, be a 24/7 case. And typically, the way that 24/7s are scheduled, but it's different. I've seen other agencies do it differently. It's either two 12-hour shifts or it's three 8-hour shifts. In my opinion, two 12-hour shifts is a heck of a lot easier to schedule than three 8-hour shifts. And I'd happy to have this conversation. From my point of view, it's better for the clients. It's better for the home care agency. Basically, mainly because there's less moving parts. The more moving parts you have, the more things can get broken. Versus if you have two shifts during the day, one starts at 7 and the next one starts at 8 o'clock, then there's only two times you really need to worry about the schedule of somebody getting there on time and somebody leaving on time. Versus if you have three eights, then you're dealing with, certainly 50% more changes in the schedule every single day, and there's a higher risk that one of those caregivers is going to not make it. Additionally, it makes it difficult for when people get off services and when they get when they leave a shift and they end a shift. So if you're doing some type of shift from like 7 to 3, then 3 to, what would it be, 3 to 11, and then 11 to 7, or even if you do 8 to 12, 12 to 8, 12 to 8 kind of thing, whatever. I'm messing it up, but if you have three shifts, one of those shifts is going to get over late at night, and the difficulty of that is that family caregivers are asleep at 11, 12 o'clock at night that aren't working, right? Most people are. So yeah, again, it goes back to it's just easier to do two 12-hour shifts, and I find that most people prefer that as well because it's less caregivers in the home, and it's easier to schedule because if you have a call out at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, I mean, it's going to be a pain in the neck to find coverage for that. That's not easy to find because the caregivers that aren't working that would normally be available are already asleep and their phone's on silent and they're getting ready for the next day. So that is why in with Minute Women, we really don't have any shift changes past 9 o'clock at night. Our shift changes can be as early as they want, but 9 o'clock is the latest shift change we'll do because if somebody can't make it to the case and there's an emergency and there's a call out, you want to you want to give yourself the best opportunity to find a fill-in for that. And the later at night that is, the less of a chance you're going to find that fill-in, and it's going to be, a really difficult conversation with the family members. Well, what do we do? Is the agency going to go over and fill the shift, which is what we would normally do, but some agencies say, hey, listen, we don't have anybody, so you're going to have to cover yourself, family members, so they're getting up out of bed to provide the care for their mom or dad. And again, that just makes a really tough situation worse. So I would recommend 2 12-hour shifts a day. And then that way you only have to worry about really 2 shift changes per day versus 3. And then 24/7 care. What typically happens with 24/7 care is you're going to have your A team. You're going to have the caregivers that are doing a great job, the caregivers that are connecting with the client on a personal level, and those are the folks that you want doing your main shifts during the day, typically, right? And then what we call like a B caregiver is somebody that you know they have a really good relationship with the client and they do their job well. And then a C caregiver to us is somebody that does their job well, but maybe they haven't connected with the client, you know, on that personal level. So the A, B, and C kind of rankings that we give are more internal about like what that connection is with the client. We ideally focus on ability. We focus on ability, availability, and personality, right? So they have to be available, right? The Bill Belichick, the best ability is availability. They have to be available to do the shift. They have to have the skills that are needed to be able to provide care for this person who's living with dementia and the specific type of challenges they have. And in some cases, we have to train caregivers on the unique situations they're walking into because every client is different. And then the personality, and the personality match can be it can be very simple things that make things just go really smoothly. We have a client that they love their caregiver for many reasons, but one of the main big reasons is the caregiver puts their pajamas in the dryer for a few minutes before bedtime, so the client doesn't go to bed cold in any way, shape, or form, and that just started a bond that has been going on for years now. And so that kind of is how private home care, 24/7 works. It's for us 2 12-hour shifts, usually ongoing, but whatever the family wants, um, and then that schedule just repeats itself week in and week out, and they're usually pretty stable in the sense of the caregivers know their shifts that they're on, um, and they go to the shifts when they're scheduled. One of the nice things about 24/7 cases, I mean, it's part of the amount of revenue that you're spending or the amount of money that's being spent, is that you have a number of caregivers that are familiar with that client. And one of the benefits and the pros of that is if there is a call out, the first people we call are people that are already on the shift. Even if they're going to go into 4 or 5 hours of overtime, I don't really care. It's the forest through the trees. It is better to place somebody in that shift that knows that client, has worked with that client before in the past, and if we have to eat a few hours of overtime, so be it. And so that is one of the benefits of 24/7 is that usually when you have 4 to 7 caregivers on a case, 5 to 8 caregivers on a case, you're going to have somebody that's willing to pick up a shift in an emergency, and it still provides that continuity of care. Doesn't always happen, but that's one of the benefits of it. The other big one that not all private, everybody's doing hourly, everybody's doing 24/7. The next one is where there are less people doing it, but the majority of home care companies provided is live-in care. I personally think with live-in care, that's going the way of the dodo bird. It is very difficult to deal with the labor laws around 24/7 live-in care. There are agencies out there that only do live-in care, and there are pros and cons to it. So live-in care is a service that people can be in the home for a few days to 7 days a week ongoing. And so, in the past, you could have somebody in the home, the same person in the home for months at a time, which is fine. But then there's laws around when the case ends, where are they going to stay because that's considered their home. A lot of assisted livings don't want to have live-in caregivers in the home because then at certain periods of time, through the eyes of the law, the assisted living becomes the caregiver's home, and that can become a problem. Typically, caregivers aren't do have a place to stay if a case ends. But if somebody's in the home for 7 days ongoing and the case unexpectedly ends, somebody dies, by law, home care companies are supposed to provide either monetary reimbursement to find a place to stay until they find a more secure living situation, or they're supposed to provide them some type of accommodations. We do 4-3 splits. That's typically how we do uh, live-ins. So you have two caregivers providing care. One's doing 4 days, the other is doing 3 days, assuming it's a 7-day live-in, which oftentimes they are. The benefits are the costs are lower than 24-hour care. The reason being is that you're typically with live-ins, somebody's choosing live-in because it's going to be an ongoing basis, right? It's going to likely be for not just weeks, but months at a time. So there's kind of like a bulk discount, if you will, with live-ins. And since the caregivers aren't traveling back and forth every single day, that also allows the cost of live-in to go down. And so it's when folks are looking at 13, 14, 15 hours a day of care, we let them know that that's kind of the break even where you might want to start looking at live-in services, because it may be cost effective to do that where you have somebody in the home. Now, where live-ins can be a little tricky is that caregiver is supposed to be able to get 8 hours of uninterrupted rest per night. And so if somebody's getting up in the middle of the night to help somebody, that then would revert, that time that they're up would revert to hourly care and would be charged as if it's hourly care. Where it gets tricky is when somebody's getting up multiple times in the night. One time every once in a while, or every once or twice a week to help get somebody to go to the bathroom or whatever. It's not the end of the world. But if somebody's up 4 times a night every single night, that case needs to automatically revert to a 24/7, 12-hour shifts, because that caregiver is going to be exhausted, and they're eventually going to burn out because they're running on no sleep. So that's something to be concerned about. Or what can happen is agencies can put in a caregiver to be there at night. So let's say the caregiver's working, their day shift, and let's say at 11 o'clock at night is when they're off, right? They get to go to bed from 11 to 7. Um, then a caregiver would come in at like 10 o'clock at night. There would be an overlap there just so that it there's an overlap and an ability to pass off the situation. And so from like, 10 o'clock at night to 7:30 in the morning, a hourly caregiver would come in. And then that way, the benefit of that is it's not really the lower cost, because it ends up being what the roughly the same cost of 24/7. But the benefit of it is you don't have as many caregivers in the home. So in theory, you would only need 4 caregivers instead of needing 6, 7, in some cases 8 caregivers on a 24/7 case, because you have the 2 caregivers doing the 4-3 split, and then you have 2 caregivers doing the overnight care at about 8 or 9 hours a night of each. So and then that way, less faces in the home, less scheduling to manage, and of course, um, families like consistency. So live-ins are very popular, but I think they're going to be going away because of the regulations around them, and I think it's just too easy to hire caregivers away from agencies or hire live-ins privately under the table. And it's getting more and more difficult to have that situation occur. And we can talk about that in another video. I'm not going to make this a 45-minute long video to talk about live-ins, but certainly it's something to talk about. But that's what live-in is, where a caregiver comes in and stays for whatever period of time that is, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And there are a lot of agencies that do that, but not every agency does live-in for the very reasons that I've explained. Out in California, live-ins are dead. And the reason why live-ins are dead is California passed a law that said if anybody works more than 8-hour shifts, they automatically get overtime. So instead of at 40 hours, you start getting overtime. It's at 8 hours consecutively. So in that ninth hour, you're getting overtime. So it's made all 24/7 cases go to 3 8-hour shifts, and it's made all live-ins go away. And so now that regulation has basically forced live-ins under the table work. So it's unregulated. there's no agency really doing them. It's all kind of under the table work, which has its pros and its cons. And that's another video we can do. The next thing you can find with private agencies, and now we're getting into probably a minority of private agencies do this, not the majority, is private nursing. Private nursing is kind of a weird one in Massachusetts, as like if you're a home health care company, you have to be regulated by DPH because you're being reimbursed by CMS. In the private home care world, private nursing is not regulated whatsoever. And I know that there's been some tough conversations between home health companies and private nursing companies where they feel that a private nursing company should be regulated like they are because they're providing medical care. We don't provide private nursing services, but there are agencies out there that do. And if you need private nursing or if you need something of that kind, they're available. And there's certainly plenty of private nursing clients that prefer to have a nurse come in rather than have an aide come in. And even if that nurse is doing the same ADLs that an aide can do, I have met those types of nurses. I know those types of agencies that cater to ultra high net worth folks that say, I'd rather just have a nurse come in, even if they're not doing medical nursing tasks. They're doing what a home health aide or a CNA could do. But private nursing is definitely out there. And then the final one, to keep this video under 30 minutes, is care management. Private agencies certainly diversify into different revenue streams, and care management is one of them. Care management is another kind of wild, wild west situation like private home care. There's ALCO, the Aging Life Care Association. It used to be geriatric care managers. I still call folks geriatric care managers, or just shorten it up, care managers. But there is no regulation on care managers. I can, kind of like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy, I can declare that I'm a care manager and I magically am one. All I need to do is just put it on LinkedIn, boom, I'm a care manager. And so, kind of like private agencies, the onus is on family members to make sure that the care manager is somebody good. Typically, care managers are they're nurses or they're licensed social workers or maybe they're case managers in a previous role, but they typically have some type of degree that lends itself to that type of work, but it is not required. If you want to be part of ALCA, which is their national and state association that represents them, you need to have some type of licensure, or you need to have enough experience under a care manager to be considered having that licensure, something along those lines. But in general, you don't need to have any. There's no regulation on care management. So a lot of some private agencies do it different ways. They may say, hey, listen, Mabel is going to provide care. We're going to provide care for Mabel, and with that care, you have to get care management. That's one way that some agencies do it. So to join our private home care agency, you need to get at least 4 hours a month of care management services, which is fine. So they bill for the care management and then they bill for the private home care. Other agencies do it the other way around, where we're happy to just provide you private home care services, and then if you need care management services, we have that available and we can do that on your behalf for the hourly fee. And so that is something that private home care companies are always looking at diversifying in, and looking at if care management is another service that they can provide in a revenue stream that they can bring in. So I'm sure there's a couple other outliers there that private home care companies do. I mean, since we're unregulated, we can kind of do what we want, which is wild. But live-ins, hourly, 24/7, private nursing and care management are kind of the bulk of what is under the umbrella of many private agencies do. I mean, I can look at the benchmarking survey here. Which is, this benchmarking survey comes out every single year, and talks about what different agencies do and what their most common I might not be able to find it because it's such a big book, but those are kind of the big ones that I've found that people use. but not everybody. It's all about kind of diversifying and providing different services to individuals. So, you know, I don't know where I'll find that. Maybe it's under service offerings. All right, I got it here. So it's hourly care, live-in care, geriatric care management, private duty skilled nursing, and then those are the big ones. Very few agencies do alert monitoring systems. There's just not a lot of crazy amount of money into that. So those are the big four right there. So with that being said, hopefully the video was educational for you. If you have thoughts, if you have comments, put them down in the comment section, I guess, and we'll catch you on the next one. Enjoy your Tuesday and have a cup of coffee.